Hi, fourth grade. Welcome back to your math lessons. Today we'll be starting chapter 23. This chapter is all about measurement. We're going to be talking about customary measurement today. Please take out your math journals and label them 23.1 customary measurement. You can open up your textbooks to page 590. I'm going to post this picture on Class Dojo for you to reference. It's a great picture to reference to see the sizes of these different measurement increments so that you get an understanding of which is smaller and bigger. This is a good visual to have on hand. So let's talk about the different measurement units that we'll be talking about today. You'll need to take these down in your notes for your reference. So I suggest pausing the video and copying down these 3 different charts with the different measurements on it. Then unpause so we can talk about it. So one type of unit of measurement is called linear measurements. Now these measurements are used to measure anything having to do with length, width, height, and distance. So these are our measurements like feet, yards, and miles, and inches. So these are just some quick conversions for you. 1 foot is 12 inches. 1 yard is 3 feet, which also equals 36 inches. You'll notice wherever you see feet, that's in green. Wherever you see inches, that's in orange. Miles is in red, and yards is in purple, just for a quick reference for you to be able to see that. You'll definitely want to have this down in your journals yourself as well. The next type of unit of measurement is for capacity. Capacity is volume, so the measure of how much a container can hold. Cups, ounces, pints, quarts, and gallons are all units of measurement to measure the volume or capacity of a container, how much it can hold. And then last, we have units to measure weight. Weight is the measure of an object's weight, how heavy it is. So we have, for the units of measurement for weight in the customary system, we have pounds, ounces, and tons. Tomorrow we'll be talking about the metric system of measurement for linear, capacity, and weight, and that will be different. In the United States of America, we use customary measurement scales, which is why we're starting with it first. Basically, the entire rest of the world uses metric measurement systems. So it's important for you to understand both. Our country uses customary, but the rest of the world uses metric. So let's take a look at how to start manipulating these different measurements to get from one unit to another unit. I'm going to show you 3 different ways to be able to convert from one unit to the other unit. The first is actually 2-in-1. It's deciding whether you should multiply or divide. So for this, what you're definitely going to need to have reference to is this picture here. I'm going to post this on Class Dojo for you to be able to look back at so you can see whether you're going from a larger unit to a smaller unit or a smaller unit to a larger unit. So let's take a look. In example A, we see here that the solution is to multiply. Whenever you're going from a large unit to a smaller unit, you're going to use multiplication. So if I look back here, it's going from pounds to ounces. So if I look back at our reference picture, I see pounds is a larger unit, ounces is a smaller unit. Do you see how much bigger a pound is from an ounce? So whenever you're going from big to small, you're going to multiply because you want to see how many small little pieces could fit in this big, huge piece. So we're using multiplication to do that. So let's make a note for ourselves here. To convert units, follow these steps. So make sure you're writing this down in your journal. So if we're going from a big unit to a smaller unit, that means we're going to multiply. if we're going from a small unit to a big unit, we're going to divide. Let me show you that. So looking here at example B, for dividing, we're going from pints to quarts. Let's take a look back at that original picture. Going from a pint, which is a smaller unit, than a quart, we want to see how many pints we could split that up into. Whenever we're trying to split that up into, that is division. So when you're going from a small unit to a larger unit, you're wanting to use division for the whatever the equality is. So going from pints to quarts, we see in our conversion chart that 1 quart is 2 pints. So we would take that number that they give us, however many pints there are, and we would divide that by 2 because there's 2 pints in every quart. So follow these notes. Whenever you are going from a smaller unit to a bigger unit, use division. A bigger unit to a smaller unit, use multiplication. Then the next thing that you're going to do, so we're going to practice some that are this way, where we're trying to pick between multiplication or division. And then the other way that we can do, which we'll practice today as well, is using an equation. Now, sometimes they will tell us the equation, and sometimes they will show us a chart and we'll have to write the equation. Now, we have done this many times before, but it has been a while. So I just want to remind you before we start practicing, when we're trying to find an equation, we're looking for a pattern in the chart. So we're looking for, how do we get from one number to another number? Is it multiplication, division, addition, subtraction? Is it going up or down by how much or how many? So, and then we use an equation to write a rule for the table. We've done that in previous chapters, so this will be a bit of a review. But step 3, or this third way to solve, is to use an equation. All right, now that we've taken down some notes, let's get to practicing. We're going to flip a lot back to our helpful guides with our equality chart and also with the chart at the beginning so we can visualize those different units of measurement. So number 1, let's get to practicing. Ask how many pounds are equal to 5 tons. So we're going from pounds to tons. So how many pounds equals 5 tons? So we're not sure of how many pounds that is to equal 5 tons. Let's begin practicing using either multiplication or division. So to do this, I'm going to go back to my original chart picture, and I'm going to take a look at the units from pounds to tons. Now, I don't even have pounds on this. Oh, I do have pounds, excuse me. I don't have tons on this chart here. Tons are huge. That's like what we use to measure the weight of a car. So looking here, pounds is what we use to measure the weight of someone's body. So tons are definitely bigger. Now looking here, I do have on my chart that 1 ton is 2,000 pounds. So I know that is definitely going from something that is larger to a smaller unit. So looking back at our notes, when we're going from something larger, a unit that is larger, to a unit that is smaller, we always use multiplication. So we're going to take 5 tons and we're going to multiply those 5 tons by 2,000 because it takes 2,000 pounds to equal 5 tons. So we're using multiplication. We're using that equality that 1 ton is 2,000 pounds. We're multiplying 5 times 2,000. Now you could do this in your head or you could do it out on paper. I know how to do this in my head, so I'm going to multiply my basic fact, which is 5 times 2, which is 10. And then I see that I have 3 zeros left over, so I'm going to add 3 zeros to make sure my place value is correct. So 10,000 pounds equals 5 tons. So I'm going to write that down. 10,000 pounds. That is a lot. Equals 5 tons. That's my final answer. All right, for this, now we're going to think back to what would be reasonable for a measurement. So this is where the first picture would really come in handy for us to be able to visualize if you don't have a good handle on these systems of measurement. So for number 2, I see a computer, and it's asking whether 20 feet would be a good measurement for the width of a computer or 20 inches. So you guys should know enough about a ruler to know the difference between feet and inches, but just in case, let's go back and take a look here. This ruler shows inches, 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inch, 4 inch, and this whole thing together is 1 foot. So it's saying a computer could be 20 of these put together, or 20 inches, which would be just about 2 of these put together. So what sounds more reasonable? Definitely 20 inches. 20 inches to measure the width of a computer screen would be much more reasonable than 20 feet. That is crazy. Let's take a look at number 3. Number 3 says 2 cups or 2 quarts. So this, if you're not too familiar, you might want to look back at the original picture. One thing I like to imagine for quarts and pints is cartons of ice cream. So you know those sweet little Ben & Jerry individual serving ice creams that you see in the freezer aisle? Those are in pints, and then the big, huge ice cream, those are in quarts. So that would be a good visual for you, but let's take a look. Cups are about the same size as a pint. Quarts are definitely bigger, so thinking of a coffee cup, definitely cups would be the best choice for a mug. Number 4, some grapes. Would that little bundle of grapes be about 6 ounces or 6 tons? Well, that one is the most ridiculous comparison I have ever seen. Remember, tons would be a measurement to measure very heavy objects like elephants, vehicles, airplanes, that sort of thing. So definitely ounces would be better to measure your fruit with. All right, so now we're going to get into the part of the lesson where we're going to look at a table and we're going to write an equation that could help us fill in the blanks. So to do this, we're going to look at how we're getting from one number to another, and we're going to write a rule in the form of an equation. So let's take a look by first starting to copy down the table. So we have pints, P, and cups, C. So we're starting with 8 pints and we get 16 cups. Then we have 10 pints and we're not sure how many cups. Then 12 pints is 24 cups. 14 pints is we're not sure yet how many cups. And then 16 pints, we're also not sure. So taking a look at this, they only give us 2 completed columns. We have the first one and the third one that are completed. So let's take a look. How do we get from 8 to 16? Are we adding, subtracting, multiplying, or dividing? Well, I notice that the number is going up, so that tells me it's either addition or multiplication. I know that so far in this lesson, we've only been talking about multiplication and division. So my best guess would be is that what's happening to the numbers is that it's being multiplied because it's going up, and it appears to be being multiplied by 2. Let's see if that's the same for the third column. Can I do 12 times 2 to equal 24? Yes, that does make sense. So what's happening to this equation is we're taking the number of pints and we're multiplying that by 2 to equal the number of cups. So this is our equation. Pints multiplied by 2 equals cups. Let's take a look now at the charts, the part of the chart that is not filled in. To do this, we're going to use the equation to complete those parts. What we're going to do is we're going to fill in the letter that they do tell us. They have pints filled in all the way across the board. So to find how many cups each of those equal, you can put the number that they tell you for pints into the equation. So instead of writing P, I'm going to write 10 times 2 equals C. And then I'm going to solve it. What's 10 times 2? 20. So I can write that in on the chart. Then I can use the equation again. Instead of P times 2, I'm going to write 14 times 2. What's 14 times 2? 28. So I can write that in the chart. And then instead of writing P times 2 again, I'm going to write 16 times 2 because that's the last number they give me. So what is 16 times 2? That might be a little bit more challenging for you to do in your head, so you might need to do it out vertically. 16 times 2 is 32. All right, we're going to do one more like that. Okay, number 6. Okay, number 6, we go from inches to yards. And we have 36 inches is, I don't know how many yards yet. 72 inches is 2 yards. So it looks like we're dropping down this time. So keep that in mind. 108 inches, we're not sure. 144. And then I need one more space for 180. I ran out of room. Okay, so let's take a look here. So I notice they only give me one completed, and it's the second one. So I'm going to have to use this and see if it works for the rest of them. So I see that there's 72 inches is 2 yards. So I notice that there is a huge decline. I also know that in order for there to be a decline, that can either be division or subtraction. So I don't think that it's subtraction because in this lesson we've been only talking about multiplication and division. So let's divide and see if that makes sense. So we're going to do 72 divided by 2 and see what we get. So 2 can go into 7 3 times. 3 times 2 is 6. 7 take away 6 is 1. Bring down the 2. 2 can go into 12. 6 times. 6 times 2 is 12. Subtract, we get 0. So I get 36. So that means that 72 divided by 36 is equaling the number of yards. So for my equation, I'm having inches divided by 36 equals yards. Now, to check myself, let's go back to the charts that tell me the equalities. So looking here at 1 yard, I see that that does equal 36 inches. So that makes sense. Yards times inches divided by 36 would equal the number of yards, or yards times 36 would equal the inches. It matches my chart, so I am good to go. So to solve this, what I need to do now is plug in the number they give me for inches, plug it into my equation. So in the first one, I have 36 inches, so I'm going to put 36 there instead of the word inches. I'm going to divide it by 36, and that should tell me how many yards. What is 36 divided by 36? Any number divided by itself is 1. So 36 divided by 36 equals 1. 36 inches is 1 yard, which makes sense. That's what the chart showed us as well. I'm going to have to erase each time I do this equation because I'm running out of space, but I would like you to make sure that you're taking notes down and not erasing your work. So then the next fill-in would be 108 inches. So I'll put that in instead of the word inches. 108 divided by 36. We're going to have to do some division with this. And we did not really learn how to in fourth grade, we don't learn how to divide by 2 digits. So you can do one of two things. You can either use a calculator or you can use repeated subtraction. So if you have a calculator nearby, please go ahead and pull that out because you might need it for today, and that is okay with me. I would much rather you focus your brain power on doing the conversions than on trying to solve the division and the multiplication. I'm going to save us some time and just do the division. So I'm entering into my calculator 108 divided by 36, and that equals 3. So the next fill-in would be 3 yards. Then I'm going to erase that so I can write in the next part. 144 inches is the next step in the chart, so I'll write 144 in the equation instead of the word inches. Again, I have my calculator, so I'm typing in 144 divided by 36, and that equals 4. So that equals 4 yards. And then last but not least, we have 180. So I'm going to plug in 180 into the equation instead of the word inches. So 180 divided by 36. Now I'm typing that into my calculator. 180 divided by 36, and that equals 5. So the last fill-in is 5 yards. So again, please make sure that you are taking your time on these, but don't waste a lot of your mental capacity today on solving multiplication and division equations. You can use a calculator. So if you have access to one, please do have that out when you do your assignment. All right, so we are going to now begin on the next part, which will be actually doing some measurement. Now, if you don't have a ruler at home, this is going to be challenging for you to do. So if you do not have a ruler, you can feel free to skip this section on your assignment. But if you do have a ruler, I want to show you how to measure correctly. So we have these two figures. I'm not even quite sure what they are, a shell and what looks like possibly is going to be a flower blossom. And with my ruler, I'm going to want to make sure that I use the side that is in inches, because that's what the directions is asking me to solve it in. So I'm going to use it in inches, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to line up from the dotted line to start the seashell. I'm going to make sure that my line for inches is lined up with that line. Do you see how those are almost seamless right there, lined up? That's very important when you're measuring, that you have a good starting place. And then when we come out to see how far it is, we're going to see where that line falls, and I see it falls right at the 3. So this seashell is measuring 3 inches in length. And the directions ask me to measure to the nearest inch, the nearest half inch, and the nearest quarter inch. Well, on a ruler, we have different tick marks. So let's go over that. So the little tiny tick marks are 1/8 inches. So the little teeny tiny ones are 1/8. So I'll use my blue to show you that those are equal to 8/8 of inches. Then we have the tick marks. Oh, sorry, they're not 1/8 of inches on this ruler. Okay, so let's go over the measurements on a ruler. So a ruler has a couple different tick marks, and depending on what kind of ruler you have, you might have more or less tick marks than me. My ruler in particular, each inch is broken down into different parts. So we have this inch here. If I just look at this right here, the long tick marks show inches. So I'm going to draw a long line, and those equal whole inches. Then we also have little half lines. So I'm going to draw that in red. These little half line marks show half inches. And then in between, we have In between each half-inch mark, we have other smaller tick marks that are 1/8 of inches. 1, 2, 3, 4. So those are the little ones are 1/8 inches, or sometimes they're also just 1/4 inches if it's just split in two. So 2 of those would equal 1/8 of an inch. So looking at this ruler, the next part of the question asks me to see in half inches and 1/4 inches. So these are all rounded up right to 3. So it's 3 inches measured to the nearest half inch. It's 3 inches measured to the nearest 1/4 inch, and 3 inches measured to the nearest whole inch. Let's take a look at the next object. So I have this blossom here. Again, I'm going to line up my ruler right at the correct starting point. And this one is a good one for us to practice with because it does not come all the way out to a whole inch. So I see this mark right here. I see that in measuring to the nearest whole inch, that's really close to the 4. So to the nearest whole inch, that measures 4 inches. Then to the nearest half inch would be this mark right here on the ruler. So that would be 3.5 inches is how I write that. And then to the nearest 1/4 inch, I see that I have here, this would be a 1/4 would be halfway in between the halfway mark and the whole mark over here. So I see to the nearest 1/4 inch, it appears that we are past the halfway mark, which would mean the next 1/4 would be 3/4. So this is 3 3/4 of an inch if we're measuring to the nearest 1/4 inch. So like I said, this part is really tricky if you don't have a ruler, and it can be confusing. So if you don't feel confident and you want to skip that part in your practice page, that's totally fine with me, but I do encourage you to at least try it. Okay, the next and last part that we're going to go over together today is ordering measurements from least to greatest. Now, this is where some common sense is very handy, or a handy chart. So if you don't know these measurements, it is helpful to look at that picture at the very beginning that I'm posting on Class Dojo for you, so you can easily compare these different units of measurement. So number 15, we have 30 inches compared with 2 feet, compared with 3 yards, compared with 1 mile. So right off the bat, I know the longest measurement here is miles because I hear people talking about that all the time when they're driving. So I know that's going to be the greatest. So I'm going to automatically put it way at the end. Then I know that it takes 3 feet to equal 1 yard. So I know this measurement of 3 yards is going to be the next greatest. So I'm going to put that in the order next to miles. Now, looking here at 30 inches versus 2 feet, we need to be careful because this is quite a few inches. So in order to really tell how many this is compared to 2 feet, what we're going to need to do is we need to convert feet into inches. So we're going from a larger unit to a smaller unit. Do you remember whether we multiply or divide? If you're going from a larger to a smaller, we multiply. So how many inches are in a feet? There's 12. 12 inches in 1 foot. So we're going to do 12 times 2 to find how many inches there are in 2 feet. 12 times 2 is 24 inches. So this number, we can think of it also as 24 inches. And now we can easily compare. We know now that 30 inches is the next biggest, which makes 2 feet the smallest. So it's important that you stop to do those comparisons to truly see what is greater than, or less than when it's something that might be close. We're going to do one more of those together, and then I'm going to have you start your independent practice time. So let's take a look at number 16. Number 16, we are comparing 4 pints versus 3 quarts versus 1 gallon versus 9 cups. Okay, so I don't know about you, but quarts, gallons, cups, and pints are a little bit more foreign to me. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull up that other picture so that we can really get a good comparison. Now, right off the bat, I know that thinking about measurement and what I've heard my food containers come in, I know that normally like a big jug of milk is called a gallon of milk. And I know that quarts of ice cream are those bigger ones. So let's start by comparing the gallons and the quarts. So we have 1 gallon versus 3 quarts. I'm going to go all the way back to that beginning picture for us. So 1 gallon, which would be this guy here, versus 3 quarts. Okay, now right off the bat, it looks like the quarts might be bigger, but to tell, let's actually do a comparison. So looking here, I see that 1 gallon is 4 quarts. So that's an easy thing for me to compare. 1 gallon equals 4 quarts. I'm going to write that down so I don't forget. 1 gallon equals 4 quarts. So if 1 gallon equals 4 quarts, then I know that that is bigger than 3 quarts because 1 gallon is 4. So this is also equal to 4 quarts. So I know that is going to be the biggest. So again, I'm going to write that at the end because we're writing them from least to greatest. So that's going to be at the end 1 gallon. And I'm guessing that 3 quarts is going to be next, but let's compare pints and make sure. So 4 pints versus 3 quarts. Let's take a look at the pints versus quarts. So I see in my conversion chart that 1 quart is equal to 2 pints. One quart equals 2 pints. So let's figure out how much this would be. So let's convert this quarts into pints so we can compare. 1 quart equals 2 pints. So we're going from something that is larger to something that is smaller. So we multiply. So 1 quart equals 2 pints. So if we want to figure that out, we'll do 3 times 2, which is 6. So 3 quarts is 6 pints. So I can now easily see that 3 quarts is the next biggest. Then next we have pints versus cups. So let's take a look at that measurement using my measurement chart. So I see that 1 pint is 2 cups. One pint equals 2 cups. So going from something big to something smaller, we're going to use multiplication. So to get from pints to cups so we can compare, we're going to do 4 pints times 2 because we're going from bigger to smaller. 4 times 2 is 8, so that means that 4 pints is equal to 8 cups. And now I compare. I see 8 cups is definitely less than 9 cups, so the next greatest would be 9 cups, which would leave the least to be the 4 pints. So definitely there is a lot of stuff going on in this lesson. So if you are feeling confused or overwhelmed at all, please don't fret. I just would like you to try your very, very best. And please come ready with questions to our Zoom call. This is one of the more challenging beginnings of a chapter. So try the work page, look at the answers after you've tried it on your own. and come ready with questions for Zoom on Wednesday. Today, you're going to be working on 23.1 PW. I would like you to try all of it and come ready with questions to Zoom so that we can work some problems out together. Great work today, and thanks for working hard.